the majority of our life is lived in liminal space.
And there's this in-between space, this liminal space.
This liminality that reveals possibility.
I think we're in a liminal moment, but also in a place of transformation.
I have great affection for the church and a troubled relationship with it.
Just to be alive in time means that we're on the threshold of the future.
That can't be the gospel, because God said to love our neighbors.
We don't know what the future looks like. We have to work it out together.
All right, Anthony Smith, welcome back to the Liminal Living Podcast. I guess this technically is your third time here because we tried to record earlier in the week, but the technical difficulties got to us and we just couldn't overcome.
Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, welcome back. It's good. So last time we talked, you were kind of moving from Salisbury, or you lived in Salisbury. Now you moved to Birmingham. Like, what brought about that change? What are you up to?
A confluence of things, different things. One, my mom, who was elderly, has become less independent. And so that was one thing, coming back home, help take care of my mom. Second, there's also a lot more career opportunity with the federal agency that I've worked for here in Birmingham, at least before the election. So, and then I was kind of, in my soul, my heart, felt like it was time to move past a lot of things. Move past politics for now, at least, because I begin to see bigger, deeper position, and it was a bit much. So I just felt I was in a Kairos moment, moving into this new season, back home in Alabama.
So did you kind of get burned out on what you did see? Like you get a peek behind the curtain of politics and you're like, holy crap, this is too crazy? Or like what'd you experience there? Like because you were elected to city council in Salisbury and you did some work there. So were you encouraged? Were you discouraged? Like what'd you experience?
I experienced mostly encouragement because you get to see how the decisions you make impact your community directly. My first year in, I had ran a campaign of making sure we invest more areas in the community violence. We had poured significantly into that with one after-school program, summer camp. And so I never forget, our city went, because of that funding and that investment, our city went a whole year with just one homicide.
Wow.
And then a significant drop in gunfire and gun violence. So it's things like that, man. Like you saw how things could impart a little bit of discouragement. Is just the power of how developers and corporate interests, how much power they have to lean in on political officials. And it's pretty mixed, especially if business communities and state legislature, which happens a lot. So. But it just let me know how big it is. And the thing that would discourage me is it's not that change can't happen. I believe it can, because I've seen it in increments and so forth. But that what it takes to bring about change is for a critical mass of people, right? And so oftentimes I remember it was easy for me, to run because a lot of people knew me as an activist and organizer in my community before I ran for political office, right? So you connected them in a broad coalition of different people. So it's like going from the seed of organizing. And so when you get in there, people kind of like, oh, we got our guy in there. We're gonna just go do our thing. And you kind of left to yourself. You go to city council like nobody out there. It's just you making decisions. Sometimes it's hard to move without an army behind you. And that's what I would advise. That's probably the most challenging thing I would say it's official. It taught me the power of community organizing at the grassroots level. Maybe some of you have on that scene for sure.
Yeah, getting in that grassroots stuff, and then you get kind of those corporate interests get mixing in there, and then all of a sudden, who's going to win is who's going to have more power, who's going to have more sway, and usually people that carry the purse strings carry more weight, unfortunately. Yeah. Well, I can see that you'd be kind of have a good blend of like, well, it did some good things, but also, yeah, stuff happens.
I couldn't imagine being in that position in this particular because they'll send troops to your city,
Yeah.
if you cause too much trouble, if you make too much noise and criticize the administration, you're liable to get National Guard in your city.
Yeah. The Marines are, yeah. Like I have a friend who lives in Portland and said that they, federal troops are all there. And he sent a picture of top down of just a really nice looking view of kind of downtown. He's like, here's our war zone. It's like, it's just parks and people out walking their dogs and stuff. And it's like, what kind of war zone is this that needs, the military to show up here? This is a little bit crazy. Yeah. You got out of that political position before, kind of everything went down now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of cities are losing federal grants because of the budget, whatever, the cuts that they made in the federal budget, Social Security. So there's just a lot of uncertainty right now.
Yeah. Are you facing that uncertainty in your current position? You said you're in a federal position. Is that?
Yeah. Well, after last week's announcement, he said the Democrats don't play ball, that he would just literally just fire federal employees.
Yeah.
Do a mass firing. Several of my coworkers, a lot of them were anxious, horrified, scared. How they gonna take care of their families? Yeah, it's sad. So I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think with the consolidation of power that they're doing, I was going to say trying to do, but they're kind of doing it. It leaves those truth tellers on the fringes, kind of like draws new lines where it just kind of pushes them out. There's no room for the prophetic voice. And like you do a lot of prophetic truth telling on your Facebook page. A couple of people, like there's a couple of people I will like stop and read, like no matter what. And you're one of those people that's like, oh, Anthony's post something, I got to stop and read this, because you always have a way of truth telling about you. And like I've been diving into the book, like Paul's epistles lately. I've always been afraid of them because I grew up fundamentalist and it was used in a certain way. And then I didn't have a lens to go back to them. And I've been using the lens of Paul encouraging folks that are in the midst of like an empire cult system to remain faithful. It's not just handing out moralities and universal do this, don't do that kind of stuff, but I'm reading it through the lens of how can a Christian community remain faithful when the empire demands this of you and asks you to do this. And all of a sudden those epistles are just like, it's a doorway that has given me access to them again that I've been afraid to walk through or even look at. And, I've been sticking with the Gospels and just saying, I understand Jesus. Like I can figure that one out, but Paul is kind of hard. But I'm wondering if you can maybe do a little comparing and contrasting of the God that you imagine versus the God that the conservative political party today is imagining. That whole Christian nationalism understanding of God is not the same. And it's really hard for folks on the conservative end of the spectrum to separate out their politics from their gospel because they kind of blended it into one. So how do you imagine God that would be different than how the Christian nationalists imagine God?
Yeah. As somebody who was once a Christian nationalist, I was a Christian nationalist at one point. Actually, in its more extreme form, I was part of the Christian Reconstructionist movement, led by Rush Dunning, Gary North, Gary DeMar, a whole bunch of Westerners passed away, I think, out of Texas. They're the guys who kind of popularized the idea of dominionism.
Okay.
Which is Texas, around that way. So I kind of understand why folks are into that, because there's a certain mythology about this country and the way that God and Christianity were perceived. In many ways, it causes empathy to rise up within me, because people a lot of millions of people inherit this view of Christianity as a conquering religion, as a cultural takeover, taking the city for Jesus. We're here to claim victory over these infidels, right? In whatever environment that you feel called to conquer for the emperor, right? Jesus, Constantine, right? The Constantinian Jesus,
Mm-hmm.
the Jesus that wants to run an empire, a human empire, like Rome, and of course now America. So the children of that kind of Christianity, their great grandchildren, are here now, right? And they have a large megaphone. They still have a small percentage of the population, but because it's complete allied with power, economic power, corporate power, they have a big platform. And now they have a lot of political control. But it's rooted out in this God that sits atop more of Egypt and Rome than the children of Israel. So the God of the children of Israel, I find to be loving at the core, the being of God. It's about connection, relationality. It's about immanence. It's about persuasion and guidance and not dominating. So, and solidarity. This God practices a profound act of solidarity. So, as Jesus says, whatever you've done to the least of these, my brothers and my sisters, you have also done unto me. And so, whereas the other God is distant. And I don't know if we ever talked about this, but one of the things that I would do when I used to do like a consciousness raising Bible study called Bible Lab. And whenever we would start a semester, we would go through a gospel, and I would have a picture of two images of Jesus. And I thought I put a picture of the image of Jesus. He's on the throne and he's kind of far distant from people, and he's high up in the throne. He's high and lifted up. And it's like, and so people say, I say, what song goes with that? Like gospel song or something. I said, yeah, that's how we portray Jesus. I said, but this is the image of Jesus that was produced in the 16th century.
Mm.
And then I said, I'm going to show you one of the earliest images of Jesus that we have in the first and second century. So I pull out this imagery, and it's Jesus passing out bread, right? So the earlier, it's crazy when you see the iconography on this. The earlier images of Jesus is more relational.
Mm.
He's connected. He's in a community, engaged in village life, right? He's present, and he's healing, and he's touching, and his images of holding hands of people, rough images too. But the later it gets, especially after Constantine, more regal, more imperial, more above, transcendent and high, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that is what we are dealing with when we're talking about reimagining God. For me, it's more about remembering God.
Mm-hmm.
Remembering the God that we find in Jesus in the Gospels, right? And by remember, I mean that in the Greek says anamnesis. When you recapture, when you remember, it's not just having a memory in your head, but it's also recapturing the power and the energy of that moment, right?
Mm.
So remembering God is tapping in and being mystic in many ways, right? I believe that going in the 21st century, it will be, the Christian who are tapped in to experience God within the inner self. So there's also the mystical experience of God. That God's profoundly present with us. So I don't know, man.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of what I would experience when I throw out that imagery of Jesus connecting with people. People are like, oh wow, that was.
Mm-hmm. If we're going to do like a modern iconography of Jesus from, like we have the first one where he's handing out bread, and then the more forward we get, the more regal, king-like and whatever. But we're not in a monarchy, so what would kind of the folk American religion, how would they imagine God now? Like I can imagine them draped in a flag holding an AR-15 or something. Like that would be the iconography of the folk religion of today. What kind of images come to your mind of how they imagine God in the present day if we keep that trajectory going, if we just keep lifting them up?
Yeah, I mean, you have Jesus rolling out an Apple product. Right? Remember when Steve Jobs would do the big thing, the rollout, and you'll see a lot of pastors now had that kind of format, like almost like a TED Talk.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I would say it would look like Jesus doing a TED Talk or like rolling out an Apple product or something. That would be that's what iconography would look like.
He's just standing on a red circle like they do in TED.
A big apple behind him. Jesus rolling out. And
Jesus tied up.
And I said it because the kings now are, and they've always had influence on the political leaders. And that's the super wealthy.
Mm-hmm.
And Jesus is, I think, is less of a Roman emperor and more of an oligarch.
Yeah.
Which kind of fits in with the word of faith movement, prosperity gospel. Right? God, Jesus is kind of envisioned this way.
Mm-hmm.
But there is still kind of that archetype still is in, I think, the collective American psyche, because the way that now we have a strong man in our current government who's given, who has been given like kingly kind of honor, right? So in many ways, there's a weird collusion of corporate interests and autocratic political presence, if you would call it that. And so the God that sits atop that is always a God of empire, really becomes an idol, becomes a signifier to justify a very oppressive hierarchy, dominating hierarchy over a group of people. It's about control.
Yeah.
So that's why, when Elijah calls down fire on Mount Carmel, when he faced the prophets of Baal, right? And they're calling on their God, and nothing happens, and then Elijah's mocking them, wake, where's he at? He chilling? And so it was just a signifier. It was a symbol, especially when we're talking about gods, because gods typically reflect the political economy that they sit on, right? Their personality, their characteristics. There's the thing about Israel and even the ancient world like that. Your gods were reflected in the social order. So you think about the God now that's over the social order here in America, where they're trying to put over. I mean, I saw Secretary of War, Peter Hegseth, he put out this video of him saying the Lord's Prayer. And in the background, it's all the military dropping bombs.
Oh, I saw that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like he's praying for the kingdom to show up. And it's like, wow, man. Like that's so like blasphemous.
Yeah.
And so that's the kind of God that has a lot of political power now. It's backed by the world's most powerful military, economic power on the planet, which is the United States of America. That kind of Christian nationalism is right front and center in the core of running our country right now. And it's very frightening, to be honest with you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not fighting for myself, but I'm fighting for like other people, fighting for immigrants, fighting for people who have the courage to dissent and to speak out, speak truth to power. So the God that sits atop that is wholly different from the God who practices solidarity with the oppressed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right in the middle of the Lord's Prayer, you have that whole prayer for debt relief, Forgive us our debts as we forgive those who, and it's like, yeah, because I saw that video where it's a glorification of because it's a folk religion of America is really tied to the militarism of America. And if you study like empire, the person at the top of the pyramid has all the power. It's built on the backs of all the common people below the wider base. And then you get to the top pyramid and it's like, that's the dude at the top. And they need the backing of the priesthood and the military to police it. So they need to, and then from the top comes all the blessings, like the top dog, he's the benefactor. And they thought Caesar was the benefactor in Rome, and all the blessings flow from Caesar. And I noticed, like, every time Paul starts raising up Christ in language, King of Kings, Lord of Lords, glory, and all that stuff, I noticed that he's like stealing all the titles of Caesar and giving them over to Christ in this small minority community trying to stay faithful to the empire. So you think Caesar's the King of Kings and Lord of Lords because he took over the whole world, but actually that's our God. You think he's the great benefactor from whom all blessings flow, but actually that's Christ. And so there's this treasonous language. It's almost like you have to blaspheme the folk religion of the day to get the gospel across anymore. But but that also sounds so dangerous because our folk religion is wrapped up in Christian symbolism, but it lacks the power of the actual Christian theology, I think. And so that's been the hard part. I think one of the reasons, growing up fundamentalist, like, we had no clue what the kingdom of God was. Like, we didn't study that. I didn't know that. Even I went to some college courses and I started to learn a little bit, but it was just synonymous for the place you go to when you die. That's all they could do with that one. And so since there is no theology of the kingdom of God, then we had to insert our politic in there because there was a vacuum in theological understanding. So then input conservative, Republican theology or political understandings into that vacuum of the kingdom of God because we didn't know what it was. How do you imagine the kingdom of God? What is your understanding of what the kingdom of God is and what it looks like when it arrives on earth as it is in heaven, just like that prayer that was co-opted by the military?
For me, the kingdom of God, that was Jesus' central message. And I would say that is the gospel. The kingdom of God has arrived and it's continuing to arrive. So the kingdom of God is Jesus. As the second century or first century, I think it's first century, or the patristics describe Jesus as autobasilia, which is the self-kingdom. If you want to know what the kingdom looks like, just look at Jesus. So the kingdom of God is something that looks like Jesus on the move. Jesus in action. Jesus in community. And so Jesus is a microcosm of what God desires socially, politically, economically amongst us. So Jesus, the kingdom of God, is God's social order, God's desired social order for human beings on earth. And so when Jesus talks about the kingdom arriving or is showing up or manifesting, there's always some kind of reversal. There's always some kind of healing. There's always something made right to say that this is what it looks like when God has God's way socially amongst us in this particular moment. So it becomes a snapshot of the kingdom of God.
That reversal, a little something just happened in my brain, the reversal. So being kind of the white conservative Christian fundamentalist as I was, I didn't want a reversal because that mean I had to give up power. That would mean so instead of accepting the kingdom of God as seen in the works of Jesus, we then personalized it and spiritualized it so that we can still own it and have power over it. But that whole reversal, I never saw it that way. I didn't want the reversal because it's like, no, then I can't control it and I can't manipulate this. I can't own this anymore.
Right. And it's weird because it's like that form of Christianity isn't white people. I mean, it's the Christianity that a lot of black people were converted into the United States, evangelical, sort of individualistic forms of Christianity. There's a lot of that fundamentalism. It dominates even black church world, right? Very fundamentalist, very conservative. You still have your more progressive denominations, black churches. So struggle with that within our context.
Yeah.
It's just funny how the gods of the ancient world, how they play out in how their nations are shaped. So you think about America, oftentimes the retreat, right, is less, like you said, a reversal and more of a retrieval of something in the past.
Mm-hmm.
To go in reverse versus an actual reversal.
Yeah.
And there's a lot to that. It's not only a sense of loss and recovery of once dominant Christian culture, white Christian nationalist culture. I think it's also trying to recapture meaning and coherence and transcendence as well. I don't think it's just a cultural piece. So wrapped up in there are the effects of the disenchantment that's in Western culture. The fruit of, I would say, the disenchanted elements that come out of the Enlightenment. You go into Western flattening, reality, the buffered self. You read people like Charles Taylor, who writes about enchantment and disenchantment, and living in the secular age, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you have the buffered self, people who aren't aware of transcendence and the sacred around them. Then you got the person's important self, right? They contact and they engage and they sense and they feel like they're a part of something bigger than themselves. The enchanted type person.
Yeah.
So I think there's a part of that capture of Christian nationalism. Part that captures also the deep desire for coherent meaning. Transcendent story and they're part of it. And sometimes that's a part of the package.
Yeah. Yeah. I've heard a lot of language around that going backwards, like the whole, like we're experiencing a revival or a third great awakening here in America because it feels like we're taking power back again into, we're consolidating power into kind of a Christian nationalist vision of how things ought to be. So therefore that must be God's spirit moving and a revival taking place. But you've recently kind of written about how that we're not experiencing a revival. That is not the definition of it. So what have you seen about what we're labeling as a revival? How would you label that? And then I guess the backup would be then what would be a true revival? What would that look like?
Yeah, what we're seeing, because people are focusing in on, rightfully, as a part of this, where the death of Charlie Kirk was horrendous and tragic, right? I don't want to live in a country where we end our disputes, political disputes or debates with violence. I would not want to live. So I just want to say that off game for what I'm about to say. So the movement that Mr. Kirk was a part of has a long history in this country. It goes all the way back to 50, 60 years ago, when the Republicans were losing the Southern vote, when they lost to civil rights. So Democrats in the South were a different animal than Republicans and Democrats in the North. And so once the civil rights movement began to have political gains, there was a mass exodus of the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party was the one that pushed forward civil rights legislation. So it was a mass exodus of the Democratic Party into the Republican Party, which led to red states now, what we have now. The Nixon administration, one of the chief strategists of Nixon came up with what's called the Southern Strategy. How do we maintain political dominance, corporate interest dominance over the political system? We got to find a way to keep people divided. So that's when the dog whistles. That's when the war on drugs. They began to come up with this strategy to divide people culturally. So those really with economic, political power up top can maintain control, right? So one of the things they were really intentional about, strategic about, is co-opting the evangelical movement. Up until that time, in the 70s in particular, the Southern Baptist Convention had a pro-choice platform as part of their convention. They were pro-choice. They believed a woman had a right to choose. And they didn't believe that life began at conception either. I mean, this is up until like the 70s in the Southern Baptist Convention. But those who were more part of the Catholic pro-life movement that was before the evangelical version of it, some of them were political Republicans, and they saw opening. We can use it, particular issue, as a wedge issue, right? If we're going to maintain control of the political apparatus. And so anyway, the kind of Christianity that began to develop out of that, the moral majority came out of that, right? Falwell, the Christian Coalition, the moral majority, all these different right-wing evangelical begin to meld with power as a part of a strategy to keep people divided in the South. So to keep them distracted from lower wages not keeping up with productivity, keep them distracted from the lack of health care access, distracted from the way the climate is being treated, right? So we're just going to focus on identity. We're going to focus on all these different wedge issues, abortion, homosexuality, whatever. And all the while, this is intentional. So like when people say this is a revival, when you understand history, you understand that, oh, this whole movement was a tactic to keep people divided for recognizing they have a shared well-being that they have to look out for each other. So this is a part of a larger strategy and tactic to divide people. So when people say that as a revival, I'm like, if I get Pentecostal, it's almost like I want to tell them, like, no, that's the enemy. Because the enemy comes to still kill and divide and conquer. That's what the enemy will do. And there's also, it seems to be a last-ditch effort to maintain what's perceived to be the dominant narrative in the culture. How do we press our way into power and seize it, that's what's happening right now. And try to make America a Christian again. Some kind of Christian culture. And we're going to use by any means necessary, by force, by bullying, by whatever. So yeah, I may have a lot of thoughts on this, man.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I did a little bit of history of kind of where that we are a Christian nation originated. A lot of it originated in the 50s as a response to the Cold War communist threat of Russia. It's like we need a unified front that's not secular communist. So we'll choose capitalist Christian. And it was like a bipartisan agreement, and we adopted "In God We Trust" on our money and put in God in the Pledge of Allegiance and all that. A lot of that was rooted in the 1950s.
Right.
That was a kind of a unified front against the threat of, the Cold War, the Russian secular communist Cold War thing. Like, we need to be united under this. And it gave us something to unite under, but it also gave the politicians a tool with like the McCarthyism where they can say, oh, if we put these labels on people, then they become targets and enemies. That's a communist, the whole Red Scare thing. And I see that happening again, where it's like, you're not a uber Christian nationalist, then you must be radical left-wing terrorist. And they're using that language now, almost like reviving that Red Scare tactic. But anyone who stands up and says, as they did against McCarthy, have you no shame? It's like, that doesn't get a response anymore. That doesn't wake people up anymore. What do you think can wake us up out of this Christian nationalist stupor that we're seem to be drunk on?
I think it'll be a couple things. One, what is needed is people to continue to educate themselves and to educate yourself with the goal of having compassion, especially for those who are still caught up in that narrative, in that kind of liturgy. So, and also in this particular moment, I think what it will take is, and I don't consider myself a prophet, but I do get the sense that we're going to see a lot of cruelty. And I think that's what it's going to take for a lot of people to turn. Once they see the cruelty that will be unleashed further, more than what we're seeing now. Right now, I think we're just seeing appetizers with ICE raids, going into school plays, going in daycare centers, people's workplaces of employment, snatching folk up, dragging them in the street. I think the cruelty is going to get worse. And I think what it will require is unfortunately, I believe, when our government begins to fire upon U.S. citizens, when it begins to kill U.S. citizens in the streets of our country, in major urban cores, I think we'll begin to see a definite shift. And I hate to see violence being used in that way, but the reality is that's been a part of American history. Great revolution, social transformations in America required a lot of violence or the threat of it. Because I always recall, like, people talk about, well, Anthony, the civil rights movement. Well, there was a lot of violence in the civil rights movement.
Mm-hmm.
But what people don't talk about and are not honest about is when King, SCLC, and all their different coalition partners called on the federal government for assistance to bring troops into southern cities, that was a threat of violence. We're using the full armament of the federal government to bring down segregation, to bring down Jim Crow, right? So, people mention the civil rights movement as an example of nonviolent revolution. I'm like, they engage in a tactic as far as the activists and organizers, but they also relied on the potential violence of the state to keep the white supremacists at bay, right? In the South. That part doesn't get talked about. But it's like Vietnam. The war in Vietnam began to change once people started to see the cruelty. The winds of change happened in the civil rights movement when people saw fire hoses and dogs on children, right? There's something about American history that cruelty has to be seen to jar people. But I feel like because we're so desensitized to cruelty in so many ways, I mean, we have the world's most powerful political economic leader who seems to take pleasure in cruelty. He seems to take pleasure in it, seems to enjoy it, which is scary. And we live in a culture where people are so desensitized to it. That's been so normalized in so many ways. I think it would have to take an extra amount of cruelty that we haven't experienced in this country yet. And unfortunately, I wish things would kind of progressively reform itself and autocorrect and all that. But something fundamentally broke when Trump became president the first time. Spiritually, collectively, something broke in America. I keep thinking about Dr. King's words, one of his last messages about this. He talks about America becoming too arrogant. And at a certain point, he's saying, I can almost hear God say, I'll break the backbone of your power, right? And give it to a nation that doesn't even know my name. So, it's interesting now on the big scheme, geopolitical scheme of things. You see the emergence of BRICS, right? So the whole world order has shifted significantly since Trump's got in office.
Yeah, I noticed that.
Which as a Christian, I'm about the kingdom of God, So it's like, if this is how the shift occurs, we're just going to learn how to love our neighbors and our enemies in those contexts, right?
Yeah. I don't think we've had to do that since World War II ended and we became the dominant superpower of the world. We didn't have to love our enemy. We could we had a lot of beneficial programs that went around the world, but the majority was, the American might, the dollar and the military was how we got stuff done. And I think something fundamentally broke in Christianity too when Trump became president, not just the nation, but in the church, because we saw it's almost like there was like people just felt they had these feelings kind of like hidden away. And it's like, I'm not really allowed to indulge in, feelings of retribution, enjoying that. And, but we had these violent images of God that were fed to us from, violent retribution, atonement theories, and like how we imagine God. I think Trump has kind of showed up and showed us the false God that we've always believed in, this God of retribution, this God of revenge, this God of anger, is petty, and so it's almost like they recognized, well, Trump is someone like our God, so therefore this is good. And I think that it almost like just brought that out. Like the word apocalypse means unveiling, not just things blowing up. I think it just unveiled something rotten at the core of the theological imagination that we've had. I don't like to just criticize theology itself, because I think it's how we imagine that theology playing out that is the broken part. And we can reimagine that part without necessarily dismantling all the creeds that are central to the faith. But yeah, I think something fundamentally broke in Christianity, in our communities, in our families, our friendships. It was like a line was drawn. You are either for all this that's going on, or you are not. And it just feels like it's like there is no middle ground. There is no central moderate position anymore. You are either for violent ice raids, or you are against them. You can't be in the middle. It's like that middle ground that we used to have, at least perfunctory, it just has disappeared. And now there is just one line and you're on one side of it. And if your family members are on the other side, then it's like, it's just really hard to maintain relationships and conversations and love your neighbor as yourself, kind of a thing. So yeah, I think something's really broke when we lost those middle spaces of talking to each other.
Yeah, and the stakes are high now because
yeah, for sure.
when you think about things like climate change, right? Which the human impact that we make on the environment, the climate. You got one side that says that there's no such thing as that, right?
Yeah, just heard that this week.
Exactly, right? You had the other side that's freaked out because, we're literally day by day making the earth more and more uninhabitable. And how do you have middle ground with folks like that? How do you sit down at the table?
Right. Stakes are high.
Do you want to have a place for your descendants to live?
Mm-hmm.
And how do you begin a conversation with someone like that and they say, oh, all that stuff you say is a myth anyway. It's not even real, right? Climate's not changing. It's always done this.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I don't know. Only I know is that history teaches us that these things have a way to die and give birth to something else. But like even with capitalism, which for me is the thing that drives a lot of this, Karl Marx taught us that, within capitalism, it has within itself the seeds of its own destruction. So it just consume. And at a certain point, it doesn't give thought to the surrounding environment. Right? So it consume a whole space, take all the oxygen out the room, and then people begin to feel the pain of that. And again, I think what it will take to really break this spell of white Christian nationalism in this country is God allowing us to feel the brunt of what it means to accept this way of being in the world, and then forcing it on other people.
Yeah.
So there's almost a sense of like, what it's going to take is for us to feel reality, the reality of this, and what it does to other human beings, and what it does to whole ecosystems and countries and neighborhoods, and it causes genocide. It has committed genocide. It is destroyed the planet. And so until a critical mass of people began to feel the weight and the pain and the harm that this is causing in the world, I think a lot of that fever will break, because this form of Christianity does aid and abet genocide, and it is right now in Gaza.
Mm-hmm.
It aids and abet planetary destruction by giving theological justification to a political apparatus that's just one to drive the earth to unsustainable levels. So I think when we feel the pain of it, you know how people say, until you experience it personally, people don't really get involved.
Yeah.
And we have more of a sense of that. I think that's when this thing will begin to break a little bit.
Mm-hmm. I wonder if it's not going to take the cruelty to wake us up, because we're so used to seeing that. I wonder if it's going to hit us in the pocketbook first. Like that's the thing that'll wake us up, is when we see, costs rising and wages stagnant and housing and energy and all those things like going beyond our reach. I think a lot of people already are starting to feel some pinches and everything, but maybe when it comes home into the pocketbook, which is kind of usually in a capitalistic society, that's where it hurts the most.
Yeah, we don't have to go far. We have examples of countries that engage in really gross, horrendous austerity towards its citizens. And these tend to be countries with a lot of violence, right? Survival violence, people trying to survive.
Mm-hmm.
off the limited resources that gets passed back on to them. And like we have examples all over the world now of what happens when you engage in kind of austerity politics, left unchecked, and it causes greater inequality, higher levels of poverty, gun violence, crime goes up because people are desperate. And so I think when more and more people experience that, the whole narrative, and traditionally what's happened in America when we would have periods like that, we would say, oh, we just need more police. We just need more police. Well, it's at a point where it's obvious that's not working because we have a large carceral presence than China, right? We incarcerate more people per person than China does. And so it's like, when people get tired of that, and I think they're not going to keep being able to sell that on us because you have countries that have significant population, but they don't have the level of crime, violent crime that we have, especially in Western democracies. What's the comparison, the contrast? The way they look out for each other, right? They have more of a bigger social safety net. They invest publicly. They believe in public goods, public transportation. And so with us, the idea of law and order, the idea of ensuring a stable political unit by force, as they say, peace through strength, right? Mm-hmm. There's a term they use. It is a very cynical, they don't say atheistic, no one disrespect my atheist brothers and sisters. But it's like a very cynical use for religion.
Yeah.
And it goes back to my challenge for a lot of my brothers and sisters who are caught up in that kind of Christian worldview is I asked them, why do you believe Jesus needs to be saved? You're trying to ensure a social order, particular force on social order to protect Christianity, to protect Jesus. And I would tell them, like, if you believe Jesus is raised from the dead, you don't need to. Jesus doesn't need protecting. Jesus don't need you to control and force upon people your version of Christianity to sustain or protect himself. Jesus is not really into that. He gives of himself.
Yeah.
And he's raised from the dead.
Yeah. It's almost like if we really had a theology that believed that Christ was who he claimed to be, then we wouldn't have to be so defensive and reactionary with our faith against the things in society that Christians are most afraid of.
But you talk about revival, though?
Yeah. What does that look like?
Revival looks like God showing up, God manifesting. But when God manifests, it's in the midst of actions being taken with the oppressed. So revival looks like God showing up, inspiring, energizing reversals, transformations in the world. The church finds the energy or the grace to embody, live out what we see Jesus doing in the Gospels. To me, that's what revival is. Right? Revival is not trying to protect a very conservative social order. Right? That's not what revival is. Revival, it's about God energizing us, reviving us to be agents in the kingdom of God, to bring about the reversal. Well, the last shall be first, and the first shall be last. Play our part in creating a world that's more just, that shares its resources, that operates out of abundance. Mm-hmm. And so that's what revival looks like. When we have those moments as a church, we experience grace that energize us to work for that kind of world, not to build a world that's exclusive and dominating. And that's what revival looks like. And it's like the book of Acts. Right? After the day of Pentecost, it says they shared their resources, right? They went all the way, houses and land, sold them, gave the proceeds, take care of the poor. There was no need, there was no needy among them. There were no poor among them because the way that they shared their economic resources amongst each other. That happens after Pentecost, after the Spirit falls. Mm-hmm. And so people always ask me when I see revival, we begin to see a reversal. If we don't see a reversal of power, then I don't know if that's a revival. Mm-hmm. Just having a great experience, having a worship concert is not a revival. Revivals had very real material, social, political, economic reality to them. There's a concrete aspect to revival. There's a material reality to revival breaking out. Revival in Israel. God shows up, sends Moses to Israel who's in bondage in Egypt. God shows up in signs and wonders. They are literally extracted from a system of domination. Whole people are taken literally from the jaws of a domination system. So God showing up and revealing with signs and wonders was also a profound political, social, material change for these folks. So me, if we're not talking about, somebody asked me, where's God moving? Where's the change happening? Where are things finding reversal? When is power being shifted? Right? I'm looking for those kind of places. For me, that's why I would see revival.
I like that. The power shifting is a sign of revival. Like even Azusa Street was not just steeped in displays of tongues and all the whole Pentecostal revival. It was steeped in like the racial reconciliation movement where they're trying to integrate their churches, blacks and whites, together. And that's when they started to experience the charismatic gifts of the church. But it was not about the gifts. It was about the racial reconciliation. And then the gifts happened. And I think we want all those gifts and we want the displays, but we don't want to do the work. It's like, just give us back the power.
Well, the thing is, it was not only just a racial reconciliation movement, it was also an anti-war movement.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Pentecostals in the turn of the century, right when the whole Azusa, in immediate aftermath of Azusa, that came out of a Pentecostal movement of tax resistors because they were opposed to World War I. So some of the heaviest resistors in World War I and tax resistance were Pentecostals. Like they were known to be tax resistors.
I didn't know that.
They didn't believe in war because they believed that God was breaking out, bringing everybody together, So they saw World War I as a direct assault, as a direct counter story to the kingdom of God, as they understand. But yeah, man, they were infamously known to be anti-war at the very beginning of that movement. So it wasn't just them black and white folks worshiping together. They actually dreamed of a better world. But of course, large chunks of that got conscripted.
Yep.
By Christian nationalism.
Yeah, I think a lot of the Christian nationalist is kind of in that fundamentalist Baptist spaces, evangelical spaces, but then also fundamentalist Pentecostal spaces, like in personalities like, Creflo Dollar and Kenneth Copeland and Paula White are like, they just worship the power structures and they want to be sitting at the tops of them. And then it's like I always say, like, one of my things I always say is how you get something determines who you are when you have it. And if you want to get a whole bunch of power and money and influence in order to do good, it's not going to happen because the things you have to do in order to get that stuff is not going to turn you into the kind of person that'll want to give that stuff away. So if you don't cultivate the virtues of Christ-likeness in your person in the present, then getting more power is just going to be a continuation of those vices within us. And I love what in Paul's letters, like his lists of moralities and vices and virtues and all that, he's doing like this grand reversal. Like, well, the empire values wrath and revenge and violence, but I want you to value as a virtue instead. Those are your vices. Your virtues are going to be humility and service and love and compassion. They value exploitation of humans. I want you to embrace faithfulness to the people you love. And he takes that grand reversal of the virtues of the empire become the vices of the faith. And it's almost like we forgot about that altogether and we're just pursuing the vices or the virtues of the empire and calling them the virtues of the faith. Like we just mesh the lines so intensely, can't see them apart anymore.
There's also what I was going to say. You ever watched the Star Wars series Andor?
I watched the first one. We have yet to watch the second one, but the first one was probably one of my favorites in the Star Wars world.
Okay. Man. So there's a scene where one of the chief spies is he's being asked a question like, why, this person was, because he was asking this person to do something, sacrifice something significant. And this person was new and they fired back. Well, what did you give up? Right? What did you give up? What did you sacrifice for the rebel forces? What did you sacrifice? And this person gives this long, it's famous now, this monologue. And he basically says, I gave up my soul for a better world. Mm-hmm. So I became the thing that's not good in order to have this good end. And that's the sense that I get from a lot of people. Like, we're willing to have a dude that we know is not a good person. We know he's cruel. We know he's narcissistic. We know that he's sick. Something's not right with him. But he's our guy. The means justify the ends, right? Mm-hmm. So there's this kind of, I feel like there's a whole generation, spiritual generation of Christians that are like, we have to do the bad thing to get this good thing that we want, right? We don't want this bad thing, we want this good thing. But we'll be bad to get it. And that's kind of what I get a sense of, like this sense of, yeah, we can't be kind now. We can't be. That's why this whole attack, weirdly enough, in evangelical space about empathy, like attacking empathy.
Yeah, calling it a sin.
Yeah, it's like, wow, that's wild. That's the willingness to become the bad thing so you can get your good thing. And it's like, nobody would have said anything like that 10 years ago.
Yeah, now we got books and Bible studies about it.
I couldn't even imagine a white evangelical leader saying some stuff like that 10 years ago.
Yeah, something got broke, that's for sure. But so as you do the work of like truth telling in your spaces on your page, what are some of the bright spots? What are some of the hopeful spots that you're seeing that give you the fuel to saying something is getting done, like some good work is being accomplished, even though all this, we're inundated with the flood of bad news every day? I see this, and this happening around me. And so I have a little bit of encouragement because those are getting harder to find. So what are you seeing?
Yeah. So right now I'm engaged in the local DSA chapter here in Birmingham, Democratic Socialists of America. And so I do a lot of organizing with them. And so for me, the signs of hope are very close to me, where I'm seeing young folks build mutual aid networks, doing street solidarity, and there's a lot of energy behind it with young people engaged in talking about policy, how it impacts their neighbors, organizing in certain neighborhoods. There's one neighborhood here that we're doing some grassroots work on to have people's assemblies in these neighborhoods. So there's like on the ground the work of building, rethreading community, right? Like it's happening in different places.
Yeah.
And usually real change happens, it bubbles up from the bottom to the top. This thing that we haven't seen a lot of this still bubble over yet, but I think we'll see the fruit of it. Because while the autocrats are busy, while the oligarchs are busy, there are also people in their communities reweaving the fabric of their community, right? Taking after each other, looking after each other. And so that's kind of where I'm seeing on the ground, people refusing to accept the fear, people who are refusing to accept the fragmentation and the loneliness of our culture right now, keeping us all apart from each other in different ways, where people are intentionally creating spaces to do good work in their neighborhoods. So things like that give me hope, because those kind of spaces and the kind of life that people build together in those kind of places like that. That is what will be able to resist what's coming or what's already here. Right? Fragmented individuals are not going to be a resistance to an autocratic state. You got to be together. And so That's kind of what I'm seeing in me. That's what I'm seeing personally.
Yeah.
People coming together.
Yeah. I'm seeing the same. Like, you look at the national level, the national news, and it's like, oh gosh, there's no hope. And then you look in your backyard, and while there's still problems, like you see, you have to look for hope like in your backyard now. You can't look for it on your local news networks and all that stuff. Like, you gotta start at home.
And I tell friends, like, be careful with the diet of corporate news that you get. I'm not saying some of these people like don't watch the news at all, but a lot of the news is really corporate driven. So it's more entertainment than substance, right? Because I tell people ask me, do I watch the news? I tell people I read the news more than I watch the news. And I usually stick to the AP, Reuters, That's kind of why I stick around. But the thing is, you're not going to get, until you go out in your backyard, you're not going to realize that there are people, lots of people, who still care, right? Because the powers who have us believe that we're alone, we're fragmented, it's the opposition is overpowering. It seems to be winning daily. But the reality is that it's not. And when a system has to use power and force on displays of strength, it's already revealing its hand as weak already because it's brittle. It's already sensing being threatened. And so when that happens, we're going to tell into that. Like it can't be sustainable for long without going cuckoo, And so I think that's kind of what's going to happen.
Yeah.
People, mutual aid, reading circles, educate each other, learn self-defense, plays of learning self-defense, community self-defense. Stuff that a lot of our ancestors would do. People building community care clinics, cooperative, land co-ops, all kind of things that we can do. And people are doing around the country. So there's bright spots.
But they're very localized, that's the definition of grassroots right there. Because you gotta, that's how it's going to happen. Well, I appreciate you doing the work, telling the truth, keeping your eyes open. And, I appreciate you coming on the show. I've had some things that you got me thinking about and some more perspectives. And I'm not doing a lot of solo episodes because I have too many questions I'm asking. So I was like, who can I talk to about this one? Who can I talk to about that one? But I appreciate you coming on the show and just sharing your mind, your heart, and what things are going on, how you're telling the truth, giving us some good advice. So it's been good.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, it's been great.
All right.